day in Ukraine. Was extremely tired. I'm still tired. I'm just finally getting over the jet lag because it's a 10-hour difference. So when I arrived, it was like midnight. So and I only had 4 hours sleep the day before. So it's the time change is it's difficult. This is my third event since I've been in Ukraine the last couple of days. The first event was at the university here, and that went very well. That was a very nice event. And then I'm basically here for a convention called Eurocon. I don't know if you ever heard of it. And so I was there today, and I'll be speaking there again on Saturday as well. So a little bit about myself. My name is Davidson L. Haworth. I write fantasy novels. Basically, I've been writing since the age of 6. I've written novels, screenplays for television and films, and right now I'm writing fantasy novels. I've been writing, like I said, since the age of 6, but I really didn't get involved until after graduating college. Then I was hired by a company called TSR. I'm sure none of you have ever heard of TSR in the States, but you may have heard of the game that they produced, which is called Dungeons and Dragons. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah? And I was started right out of college writing just manuals for them. Character manuals for the game.
I love this game.
Do you?
Yeah, I play this game every Saturday.
The role-playing game?
Yeah.
Yeah? Still, wow, that's awesome.
I'm Hexblade.
Oh, really? Most
Yeah.
people have converted over just to video game play now.
No,
and
I enjoy
RPGs.
playing just board.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome. And then they started getting involved into publishing novels, and they had these books that we call them choose your own adventure books. Have you ever read any of those?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it's choose
So
your.
it's you who write this
Yeah,
books?
I was one of the authors.
Cool.
Along with
My game master's, he is saying that books are just perfect.
yeah, they're
Seriously, if he would be here, he would just. Fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, they were very popular in the 80s, and they came out with loads of those types of books. And one of the most popular outside of Dungeons and Dragons, in that Forgotten Realm in those series, was James Bond. So basically, choose your own adventure is you're reading the story, and then at the end of the page, and it'll say, should you do this, turn to page 68, or should you do this, turn to page 86, and you decide, what you want to do, and depending on your choices, how the book turns out, or you die, as you're reading the book, the character. And so it was an inventive and fun way to read a book. But I ended up getting the George Lucas bug, and what the George Lucas bug is, I'm sure you've heard of George Lucas. He created this small film called Star Wars. When he was writing Star Wars, the movie studios, they were telling him basically what to name his characters or how he should write his screenplay, and it was coming to a point where they were telling him how to write, and I was coming to that point as well, where I really didn't like the big corporation telling me how to write. And when you're under contract, you pretty much have no choice. It's like when you go to work, boss tells you to do something, you do it. It's also like, the comic book industry. I don't know if you guys get comic books here or not. I travel, all over the world, and I'm always looking for comic books, because I'm very big. I'm Marvel Comics. I'm a fanboy of Marvel Comics. So I'm always looking for like Iron Man or the Avengers, Captain America stuff, all the time. And I've been, for the last 2 days, looking for comic books in Ukraine. And it's sticking in my head, when you sell these magazines, there are these booths with the little hole there to exchange money. I stick my head in there. Do you have any comic books in here? And they're all like, no, we don't have any comic book, you know. You know, I'm very much into comic books. And one thing about comic books in DC Marvel, when you're writing for a comic book, and say, for example, Supergirl has long hair, and you want to write in her storyline that she cuts her hair, well, they won't allow that. So you don't have full reign of the character when you're writing for a big corporation. So I wanted to get out of that altogether, so I went to writing screenplays. And I don't know, are any of you interested in writing, or have you written anything at all? Short stories or anything? No? Basically, people ask me, how do you get into the business? You know, how do you get to work in Hollywood? You know, well, first, it helps to live in California. Yeah. Second of all, anyone can work for Hollywood. You can live right here in Kyiv and work for Hollywood, because if you can write a script and send it to the studios, you're already working in Hollywood without even leaving Kyiv. You see what I'm saying? You just need to get your script in front of people. And with technology the way it is today, it's much easier. So if you want to write a script and send them to all these Hollywood studios, you know, you tell your friends, yeah, I work for Hollywood. You know, it's that easy, you know, to do. So I was writing movie scripts, and Mel Gibson ended up picking up one of my scripts, actually. But he didn't pay me for it, because one day I went to see a movie called Apocalypto. Have you ever seen that movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, you have seen it? And it inspired me so much that after watching the film, I got on a plane to Mexico and started going through the jungles of the Mayan jungles, you know, climbing these Mayan pyramids and so forth. And because of that movie, I started to write a script about the invasion of England. You know, basically now Mel Gibson, well, last time I heard about, he was wanting to change it to like Vikings, and he wanted Leonardo DiCaprio to play one of the leading roles. I thought, well, this is cool for one of my scripts. And then Mel Gibson ended up getting into some personal problems. He ended up getting a DUI, which is under the influence of drinking while driving, and he made some personal mistakes. He married a Russian girl, and the relationship lasted like 6 months. So, and then, you know, so his life has been basically a mess since then. So since then, my script and everything is pretty much fallen to the wayside. You know, so in Hollywood, you know, once everything drops, you know, they'll never probably get back to it, because there's hundreds of scripts coming into production companies every day. You know, you're thinking, okay, if I write a script, I'm here in Kyiv, I write a script, send it out to Hollywood studios. There's hundreds and thousands of people in California alone just sending scripts. So it's very hard just to get someone to look at it, basically. So then when I realized that that wasn't working for me, I started shortening my scripts and just writing TV commercials. And in the States, I've written TV commercials, and they've been picked up and made into actual commercials. I was doing that for some time, and then what happened was the recession hit in the United States. And we're still going through this recession. We're like at 7.8 unemployment. And I don't know in regards to Ukrainian standards, but standards in the United States, 7.8 unemployment is unacceptable. We're used to like a 3.5 or a 4.0, and 7. When Americans think of like a 7.8 unemployment, it's like, oh my gosh, the country's going to collapse. You know what I mean?
We have like 10.2 or 10.5.
Yeah.
Like percents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm. And there are states, like if you pick certain states, like California is at a 10 point, a little over 10.0 in regards to unemployment. So when you have a lot of people who are unemployed, it really hurts the economy, and and still, I mean, it'll take us a good 10, 15 years to get back to where we were, you know, in the early 90s. It's going to take a long time. So when the recession hit, I said, well, I got to do something. I need to make some money here. When you're a writer, you have to write to make money, and people actually have to buy what you write. If no one's buying, then you can't survive, right? So I started going back to fantasy novels in the mid 2005, 2006, and I've been writing fantasy novels ever since. I just finished a trilogy called the Prowley trilogy. The first book was The Dragon of Prowley. Second was The Wizard of Prowley, and the third book that was released is the Vampires of Prowley. And with these books, I really went back to my roots. I love J.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I read C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia, what have you. And those are the two writers that influenced me the most growing up. So I wanted to get back to my basic roots of when I was first writing out of college, Dungeons & Dragons and those types of fantasy genre. But I decided to take real historical places and use fantasy and weave them in together. Like the title, Prowley, is actually a town that actually exists in Italy, northern Italy. And it's right on the French border. Now people say, well, you're an American, don't you write American stories? I think I've written maybe 2 American stories ever, and they were short stories, and they were recently. Most of the stories that I write all take place in Europe, because writing historical fantasy works best during the Middle Ages, right? So, if you're going to have dragons and things like that, I feel it's best to do it in the times of the Middle Ages. And that's the time, that I like best, is the Middle Ages. My family came from England. They came to America in 1920. And then my grandfather, in 1945, went from Massachusetts to California, all the way across country in an old 1930 Studebaker. I don't know if you know what a Studebaker is, that type of car. That's just, you can think of these old movies with these giant cars with these giant trunks, and you wouldn't think those cars back in those days would be able to drive from one coast to the other. It takes you about 3 weeks to drive there, all the way through. And he did, and then, and then the family just developed and stayed in California. So basically, I like to write things that have, some historical facts to it as well. I use historical characters as well in my stories. So, I love history, but there are a lot of people who are not too much into the historical subjects. They rather read just fantasy. So I'll get questions like, oh, does Prowley really exist? Or, this character, is this a real person, or did you just create it? And a lot of the people I actually use in these fantasy situations are like real people in history, and sometimes people say, is that truth or just fantasy? I said, no, that's just fantasy. I'm just using the historical figures. And one of the most interesting characters that I did was for the second book, and I needed to find a bad guy for my book. And I wanted to write about wizards because it's kind of my anti-Harry Potter book. I see wizards as they are traditionally kind of evil. Have you ever seen Mickey Mouse, that cartoon with the brooms and everything? That's my vision of a wizard, is he's, kind of old and gray and evil. And so this is how I created this character. But I said, I want to find a historical character like this, someone from history, and kind of make him into a wizard. And being influenced by C.S. Lewis, who was a practicing Anglican in England, and being influenced by Tolkien, who did The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, he was a practicing Catholic. So I thought, well, with their influence, who could I find? So I was basically looking for characters, and I found someone called Simon Magnus. Now, if you don't know who Simon Magnus is, he's actually in the Bible, and it talks about him taking the powers of the apostles and turning them for his own profit and evil and this and that. And it's actually in Scripture. He's an actual, real historical character. So I took that and turned him into the first wizard, basically. So I combined his true history and then just added it on further of him making the deal with the devil, getting all these superpowers, being encased in ice, and eventually he's encased in Italy because he traveled to Italy trying to spread what his power. So basically, there was a volcano because he was encased in ice in this volcano, and the volcano erupted and he melted and came back. And basically, what do most evil people want to do? They want to rule the world, right? You think of some of the most evil people in world history, like Hitler, Stalin, those types of people. Their whole goal is basically world domination. So that was his goal, and my characters, the good guys, it's basic, stop the bad guy. So I like to use, real people, and sometimes it's interesting to read about a real historical figure and then expand, on their history. It just makes it interesting for me as a writer. Many people say, well, why do you write, or how did you get involved in writing? I said, well, I've been writing since I was 6. I wasn't a very good student. I was very much into just writing. And, even at the age of 7 and 8, I was writing scripts. And I came to the teacher and said, I wrote this script. My friends have been practicing in the cafeteria after school, and we want to perform our play. And she says, no, Dave, your grades are really bad. Because I wouldn't listen to the teacher. I'd be too busy in the back of the class, writing what I wanted to. That's kind of my personality. I do what I want to do. Nobody tells me what to do. I'm just going to do whatever I want. That's just how I am. I think a lot of Americans are also that way too. We kind of grow up very independent. When I was growing up, at the age of 13, my dad said, get a job, buy your own clothes for school, and make your own lunch money. So I was very independent at an early age. So basically the teacher said, well, if you get good grades, then I'll allow you to do this play. And in her mind, she was thinking, well, he'll never improve his grades. So this whole play thing is never going to happen, and it'll be forgotten. But I ended up getting good grades, and then she had to say yes. So what happened is we ended up putting on plays for the entire school. And I would write these scripts, and my friends would just act out, the parts. And a lot of times what they would do is sometimes go off the script. Because we're just kids, you know what I mean? And back in the early 80s, late 70s, in cinema, it was very popular was the disaster films. I don't know if you ever seen disaster films. I guess the most recent disaster film would be Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio. It always ends up, scripted, bunch of characters going on a trip, and at the end, some disaster happens, and you kind of see how they get through the disaster and what happens after the disaster. And in that time in American cinema, there was disaster movies like every other week coming out. A real popular one was Earthquake. Have any of you ever heard of Earthquake? It was an extremely popular movie back in '78. Being from California, I don't know, has anyone ever been to California? Yeah? Yeah, both of you? How long were you there?
2 years.
2 years, okay, so you know. Whereabouts?
I was in Monterey.
Oh, I love Monterey. I love kayaking
Yeah.
in Monterey. Well, then you know, a lot of people who are raised in California are very much into movies, and we know a lot about movies. I grew up watching movies, but not a lot of recent films. Back when I was growing up, we had an old theater that showed films from like the 30s and the 40s. So I grew up watching like Laurel and Hardy or the Marx Brothers, these comedians, if you've ever heard of them. So most Californians were like walking movie encyclopedias, you know, basically. And a lot of Californians, they spend a lot of time going down to LA. It's pretty much wherever you are in California, it's an easy drive pretty much to Los Angeles. Where I live in San Jose, California, it's about 6-hour drive. And if you really want to get there, 5 hours if you're doing about 90 miles an hour all the way down, you know, Highway 5. So it's a very easy access. But LA is not what it's cracked up to be, especially if you've been there. And it's very surprising when I take people, you know, from other countries to go down there and check it out and kind of give them the tour. And I take them to like Hollywood Boulevard, and they're like, this place is a dump. You know what I mean? There's people selling drugs on the street, there's prostitution, you know, or they'll say, oh, well, look, there's the fashion district on the map. Let's go to the fashion district. Well, it's like all knockoffs of like, you know, like Levi jeans or something, but they're not Levi jeans, but they have the label on it. They're all knockoff fakes, you know, and they like buy them for like $10, and it's just, you have a lot of very seedy people, kind of downtrodden people. You know, it's kind of scary, you know, unless you go to Beverly Hills and Rodeo Drive, and then that's really nice. But if you've ever been to LA, it's kind of, Beverly Hills has like an invisible shield around it. None of the other elements from LA seem to seep in there. You know, the police seem to protect that really well. You know, the real nice areas never seem to get in that LA element that you kind of want to avoid. I'm not a Southern Californian. I was born and raised in San Jose, California. That's north near San Francisco. Have you guys ever been to San Francisco? Never? You have?
Yeah.
It's nice, right?
Yeah.
You get to do the cable car thing and the Golden Gate Bridge and all of that. Well, San Jose, when I was growing up, is pretty much a farm town. And then in the 80s, you know, you had some guy named Bill Gates who created Microsoft. And then you had, you know, these other computer companies. And San Jose exploded into this mecca, IT, computer, you know, mecca. And now it's, you know, if people say, where are you from, especially if I'm like in Ukraine or Russia or another part of Europe, they'll say, where are you from? San Jose. Where's that? I'll say, have you ever heard of Silicon Valley? Oh yeah, Silicon Valley. So San Jose is Silicon Valley, but people don't know it by its true name. But, you know, all those computer companies for San Jose, there was a good and bad. For San Jose, there really is never a recession. First of all, there's always jobs for people who work in IT, and pretty much all of it's IT. And like I said, it's almost recession-proof. And now it's coming to the point where, I don't know if you're familiar with American baseball or not. Yeah? But there's a team in Oakland called the Oakland Athletics. It's a baseball team. And they're in Oakland, and on the other side of the bay, you have the San Francisco Giants, who had just won the World Series. Well, the San Jose A's the Oakland A's want to move to San Jose. But San Francisco says, well, that's our territory, you can't move in there. And the city of San Jose is said to San Francisco, you're just a town for travelers. You're just a tourist town. San Jose is where all the jobs are at, where all the economy is at, where everything is at. The only thing you have is cable cars and a Golden Gate Bridge. So in San Jose, in California, Northern California, the demographics have changed to the extremes where San Francisco was known as the place to be. And now it's like the opposite. Now San Jose is the place to be. But still, unless you're in IT, if you're not in IT, you don't even know where San Jose is. So it's interesting for me to be born and raised there to see, you know, that shift in my lifetime. I don't think most people in a lifetime see such a dramatic shift. So basically, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. I like to, I just do tangents. I just talk on and on and on and on. So if you have to stop me, just stop me. Because I can talk for like 4 hours. I was at the university, what's the name of it again? Taurus. Yeah, I was there, and it's like a 2-hour speech, and I had to remind the faculty who was there to stop me, let me know, you know, last 20 minutes so I can do some questions and questions and answers. And that was really a great experience. So basically, you know, right now for me, what I'm doing now is I'm still writing fantasy. And people said, why don't you write short stories? And I thought, well, forget what's short stories. They're short stories, a few pages long. No one reads them, you know. And I didn't really discover the short story until about a few years ago when I was in Russia doing a book tour there.